So please give a very warm welcome to the crew that's going to be talking about the winning college playbook strategies for NIL. We're talking about NIL, which is a topic that very few of us in this room have expertise in. So we are going to bring to the stage a crew that knows a lot about it. Please give a warm welcome to the next and final panel of Sport Beach Super Bowl 2026.
All right, thank you all for joining us. And we're going to talk about NIL. NIL is something that I think, while relatively new, we feel like there are a ton of questions about this. And there's questions about what is the revenue share deal versus NIL? How does this all work? So we get to hear from an agent, an NFL expert, and an athlete currently living it firsthand as QB1 at Cal, which is pretty awesome. Brandon, I'd love to start with you because as an agent who's used to working with professional athletes, suddenly you had access to college athletes and it was a whole world that people were trying to figure out. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got into representing NIL athletes and probably your most famous athlete, Dante Moore?
Yeah, I mean, my first NIL athlete was pretty much like family, and I tell people, like, I used to be like, I'm not an NIL agent. Like, you know, I'm an agent. But now NIL is such a big part of our business. Like, you know, I'm proud to be, you know, an NIL agent. But Dante had been a family friend. His family and my family were pretty much integrated. And they used to talk to me about how good he was at football. But, you know, as a professional agent, like representing pro athletes, you're not thinking about high school kids being, you know, your future clients. There's so much that has to go right before it really would have been, you know, on my radar. But, you know, he kept getting better and better, and they asked me to help them in the recruitment process. And that's kind of how it started. And then as we've gone through this, NIL has evolved and changed so rapidly to where, I mean, you know, it's a big part of my business now, and any agent's business.
I think you're learning the business as you go in many ways, like we all are.
There are no rules for the most part. Like,
yeah.
It's changing and evolving daily. So,
right.
You know.
Well, I want to come back to the rules and working with younger athletes and how you're seeing that play out, obviously, and with Dante and all of those pieces. Sana, can you talk a little bit about the NFL? I know you partner with over 100 universities. I think 115, you said. Can you tell us about that program and how it works and how you see that as preparing some student athletes as a pathway to the NFL?
Yeah, happy to. So we have a program called our College Social Program through which my team partners with 115 universities, and we're continuing to grow that. And part of that is all about authentic storytelling. So how do we really tap into the audience that these colleges have built and continue to bring them on the journey as their guys are becoming part of our league? So we will share highlights with those colleges outside of any, you know, there's no royalties or anything there. We're sharing highlights with them purely for storytelling purposes. We are creating authentic pieces of content with them and so forth so that if you are a Cal fan and as he continues in his career, how do you follow those guys into the league? And through that program, we've also continued to create fans that come into the league, right? Like a lot of when you look at the NFL versus a lot of other leagues, the fandom is team-based. So how do we tap into this new audience, these younger generations of fans that are following players and becoming fans of players and then going into the team process? Also, the second part of that is through this program, we've seen a lot of impact on not just the league as a whole, but our clubs. So when we looked at draft, for example, this past year, the teams that grew the most were the Browns and the Giants. And they weren't typically teams that, you know, they weren't very high in the draft necessarily and so forth. But when you think about all the guys that follow Shedeur Sanders and ended up following the Browns from there, or people who were interested in Jackson Dart and followed the Giants from there, that that uptick was more than what we saw some of the Eagles followers come through after the Super Bowl last season. So it's a program that's really helped us tie storytelling into the bottom line of the league.
It's so incredibly smart. Plus, when you think about the young generation, socially native, used to being a following, and to have that pathway into the NFL, it's awesome. Jaron, you've recently recommitted to Cal, new coach, incredible, exciting season ahead. Thank you for joining us. Came over right after practice. Probably has class, all of the things. I'm curious, what role did NIL and the infrastructure that Cal has and building your brand in the Bay Area have as you were making the decision to come back to Cal this year? Because there were a lot of changes happening with the program.
Yeah, for me, NIL was a big deal, and one of my main goals in life is to take care of my family, and I'm just blessed that NIL has given us a great opportunity to be able to do that now. But for me, it was really the people that we had, behind the scenes. We had Coach Ron, and the people that we were bringing in. I was a big believer in Coach Tosh, and of course some of the people that we kept as well. Coach Rolovich was a big part of my recruiting process and keep helping me develop. So just keeping them was also a big deal. But NIL as a whole I think it's really great for players nowadays that they get to represent themselves and also provide for their families. So just allowing me to, have an opportunity to do that it's just a blessing. So yeah.
I love that. It's amazing. And I think the beauty of it, and I think where this all started in a lot of ways with the NCAA lawsuit, was the value these players like you bring to these universities and what that can mean for your families and your life, and actually making sure you reap the benefits of it. So, Brandon, I want to ask you a little bit about how you approach deals as you work with younger athletes now. I think one important thing, just to do a little NIL for dummies, which is, I would consider myself in that category. There's the revenue share side of this, which is part of the ruling coming out of the lawsuit that allows universities now to directly pay athletes. For the 2025-2026 school year, I think it's $20.5 million each university has. The majority of that is going to football and basketball programs, but each school has a choice of how to allocate that. And it'll go up incrementally year after year from here. And then there's the NIL deals. And Brandon, when we were talking earlier, you said, it's a lot like pro sports now. You have to think about that. That's their salary that they're going to commit for and get. And then there's the sponsorship side of it that they can go get. Can you talk a little bit more about how you're approaching that with athletes and what you're hearing from brands, and any red flags when you're talking with athletes and brands that you definitely avert and go the other way?
Yeah, I think that, when you talk about revenue sharing, that's like the base salary, right? Or if you're talking about professional athletes, that's their contract with the team. But you also have the collectives, which are another aspect of the base salary, and you have to tie deliverables and services to that. So as an agent, a big part of what I do is kind of protecting my clients to not make sure that the collectives are eating into their ability to earn, outside of the school and what is their base, and that the deliverables aren't too excessive to where it's getting in the way of the main thing, which is... Can
you give examples of what would be in a deliverable or...
Well, when you're talking about the NIL package with the collectives, it could be, let's say 10 appearances that could be 2 hours per appearance, because they're trying to justify pushing the deals through NIL Go. So they may try to throw a lot of these deliverables in there to justify the value. So that's just the first part of it, right? Then when you're talking about outside NIL deals, you need to make sure that whatever it is authentic to your client. Once it's on the internet, it's there forever. So if you're gonna have guys who plan on having successful pro careers, you don't want things that they're gonna be embarrassed about, 4 or 5 years from now. So I use that as a North Star and what is a fit and what isn't for our guys.
So good. And Sana, you have seen so many deals with the seat you sit in, and I'd love to hear you talk about, we're not calling brands out, I'm not gonna put you in that spot, but what ones have been successful, and what are some watch outs that you've seen that doesn't work, or why they haven't worked?
I think to the point that you were making a minute ago, it all goes back to authenticity. Who is the right person for the right brand? Does it feel forced? And for us, a lot of the benefits, so we're not on that side of the puzzle, but when you look at what we're seeing from our end, these guys are coming into the league so smart, so prepped. They know what's working for them, what isn't. We were talking in the green room a minute ago when I started at the league about 10 years ago. After the draft, I don't remember when it was, but I had to chase someone down to say, hey, can I get a video of you to put it on the NFL social account? And I had so many guys say, no, actually, I don't want to do that, or no, that's not the right fit for me. But now they're growing, besides just growing up with phones in their hands, they're a lot more socially savvy. They're media savvy when they're coming in. We were talking backstage, and he was saying that he texts with the Cal social media team because they're in touch with him to capture content. So he's prepped and ready. So when we see them come into the league and we see them come in, they're much savvier as marketers, as storytellers, and it's just such an authentic relationship that starts in college. And for us, it continues. Last night at Honors, when Matthew Stafford won MVP, Georgia's posting a lot of this content. It's not just the NFL. So that storytelling arc starts long before they take their first snap in college and continues well into their pro careers. So we've seen a lot of success there, and they're just getting smarter. So when you think about what's working, the authenticity and the brands that fit right are the ones that are working, and what's not working is where it feels forced or it's not true to who these guys are and who they're showing you they are online.
It's so true, and it's not to say you're an expert at it, Jaron. You're constantly learning, and that was very clear in our conversation. But I think it's not only you understand the social landscape and you have access to that and the resources at Cal, but as a quarterback, you're also a student, and now you're also essentially the CEO of your own brand. That's a lot to juggle that 10 years ago athletes didn't have to juggle. How do you manage all of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just really setting a schedule and, trusting your team that you have and just allowing them to play their role. And, they allow me to focus on the main goal, which is football, and just making sure that I take care of that part and everything else will fall into place. And, I just think I have a great team behind me. I have great people working beside me in football as well. So if I just continue to take care of my part, I think everything else will fall into place. So I just think that in general is really good. So, yeah.
It's so good. I think the other piece of this is financial literacy and understanding when you have more money in your pocket as a young athlete, the help and support you need and you've received. So I'd love you to talk a little bit about that and how you're thinking about it. And then Brandon, I'd love you to talk about as your role as an agent and really someone who kind of shepherds athletes through this maze, how you navigate it. And we can start with Brandon and come to you then, Jaron.
Yeah, I'm actually very happy that we get to start with the guys earlier and earlier and build like a foundation, right? I think often how you start is how you finish for a lot of these guys. If they build a lot of bad habits and don't have any financial responsibility, it's hard to reel it back in, when you're now 22, 23, getting millions of dollars for the first time. So I think a lot of the schools are doing a good job giving them resources, but, athletes of Jaron's caliber, they have professional teams around them, which allows them to help navigate, this landscape like the pro athlete that, they really are now.
Jaron?
Yeah, could you repeat that question one more time for me?
Yeah, no, it's all good. I think a lot of money's coming your way. Who's guiding you as you think about that? And you spoke earlier of everything you do is to give back to your family, and you have a ton of support, I know, from your family, but that's also pretty jarring. I'm sure there's a lot of friends coming out of the woodwork as well as an athlete.
Yeah, for sure. I think for me, first of all, my firm foundation is in God. So, just keeping Jesus first above all else, it keeps me grounded and keeps me firm. And it allows me to be able to focus on everything. And also my parents put in so much work to allow me to be able to be in this position. So just representing them and, having a strong backing. Also my team is here as well. And Coach Ron's been a big help for me as well, Auntie Nancy. And so I'm just grateful that, without those people, I wouldn't be able to help the people that I want to help back at home out. And, I have a lot of people back at home. You know, I just had a young one just pass away recently last week. So just paying my respects to all my family back home. Hopefully I'll be able to go see all my family back home that, you know, hopefully get to comfort them. But, you know, just rest in peace on my young one, RJ.
So important. I think the grounding of family and keeping you focused on what you're doing and how you go through life. Sana, I want to turn now to, as we look at NIL, I think one of the things that's unique about it, and one of the things we were all talking about, is there's local, and it is more local when you think of universities and the athletes and who they're representing. So for Jaron, the Bay Area and Cal, but also his hometown and being from Hawaii. And then there's also the national stage. And I think when you think about deals with pro athletes, often they're playing in leagues and you see them on national TV all the time, and they're more national deals for brands. I'd love you to talk a little bit about how you see it. Does that work, the local? I think there is a nice parallel to the NFL and the clubs, and kind of how the NFL approaches that as a guide for marketers to think about how they could see the difference between deals with athletes in their local area versus a national partnership.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like as we look at a lot of how partnerships are working, it's all becoming, the lines are blurring a little bit between local and national, right? When you think about where fans are coming from, they're not just local to your market anymore. Your social media and the internet's made it to where your fans are all over the world, and one of our prioritizations is globalization. So a lot of the work that we're doing is how do we take football beyond the United States? How do we play games abroad? How do we build fans abroad? So we're seeing that lens of it quite a bit, and that's a focus for us. And when we see fans come in, a lot of times, yes, once the guys get drafted, we see a lot of local fans come in. So again, going back to the example for draft last year, for the Browns, you see a big following coming in from Colorado and people that are getting tapped in to follow the Browns, but they're Colorado fans. But it also becomes a national storyline, right? Games are played, and a lot of fandom now is driven by content. Our CMO, Tim, will often use a phrase called helmets off content. How do we tell their stories, right? A lot of times when you see the guys, they're on the field with their helmets, so it's really hard to recognize them. When we take these helmets off and we tell their stories, it resonates with people around the world, and a lot of fandom that we're seeing is being developed because, oh, they saw a funny post about this guy, or they loved seeing this person with their kids. Again, going back to last night, there was a piece where Matthew, after he won MVP, all 4 of his daughters are with him. And
that's so good.
Yes, if you didn't, I cried after I saw it. But that's not something we see just resonating in Los Angeles or in his market. It's something where we're seeing fandom across the board being tapped into, and people, parents across the board are like, oh my God, this is so great. I love that he's a dad, and bringing his kids with him to honors and so forth. So that line is blurring more and more, but they both kind of exist and, synonymously and synergistically.
I think it's a point that we just have to keep revisiting as brands figure out how to dive in and partner. Brandon, can you talk a little bit about what you see between local area NIL deals versus national, or brand deals, really, because you're over your portfolio of clients, but when you look at NIL versus pro and how you're advising through that?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think NIL is expanding so rapidly that a lot of the deal flow that comes for, college quarterbacks in big markets, like it rivals what the pros are seeing unless they're superstars. And for me, it's like if the content and the marketing game plan is authentic and right for the guy, like one of my favorite deals this year was a Kiwi Clo branding deal we did with Bryce where, they made some of the dopest merch I've seen, and the content that matched around it, it was really good. So I think that although it was a local company, it was great for his brand, and the internet allows us to, to spread that content around the country and the world. So for me, I think whether it's local or national, it has to be high-level content and a high-level game plan. And then it could be a good fit for any of the guys. So I think the quality is what should be the driving force, not necessarily whether it's local or national.
It's a really good lens to look at it. What stories do you want to tell, and is it relevant to the athlete and who they are? Jaron, how important is it to you as you look at brands and potential partnerships that they're connected to either your hometown or to San Francisco or the Bay Area versus national? What are your priorities around that?
Yeah, my priorities are definitely something that fits my family and something that's really going to, help me get to the next level. I mean, there's a lot of brands out there that, that help a lot of athletes. And just for me, it's something that's kind of unique to my culture, I guess, because Polynesians, we're a lot different. So I just say something that can represent that and, represent faith in my family is one of the biggest things for me. So if working with brands, if they fit all those three things, I think those brands will really, help me get there. So yeah.
Totally makes sense. It's the quality of your story and a connection to you and where it could go. Brandon, if you could change one thing about the NIL, what would you change? I mean, you just said there's no rules, so maybe nothing.
Wow. I hate NIL Go. Like,
Sorry, you hate NIL what?
NIL Go, which is a new thing for this year where if it's over $600, the guys have to submit it. I mean, I've had clients who did national deals, and because they did it through the school, they weren't paid for 5 or 6 months because it was just caught up in the bureaucracy of NIL Go. So that would be my one complaint right now, if that's top of mind, a complaint with NIL right now.
Helpful. Jaron, anything you'd want changed?
I mean, me more so, I don't know a lot of the background information about NIL, but I'm just really enjoying the benefits that the athletes get. So, but definitely, I mean, I'd say it's different for everyone. So, I mean, I'm just glad that players are now getting paid, but I'd say it's a lot different now. It evens the playing field with all colleges. That like Indiana had their great run this year. So I just think I'm just grateful that I get to be paid for my efforts in football, but I just receive it as a blessing. But right now I have no complaints. So yeah.
Yeah. No, I think it's interesting. I think there is a debate going into this. Is it going to widen the gap of the best, most elite programs from the rest of the field? And I think Indiana and I'm sure Cal this year are like proving that that's not the case, right? And that there is, in some ways, it's resetting the field and creating different incentive programs versus just ticket sales over so many hundreds of years as maybe funded scholarships and other pieces of it.
Yeah, you have to evolve with the times. I think, the people that you hear complaining about it the most are the ones who didn't want to adapt and change with, the new age that we're in. But like for an athlete, he's coming through college. This is the greatest era ever.
As a former college athlete who didn't have NIL, you're right. That's awesome. Not that all the funding's going to volleyball, but it's cool. Sana, can you talk a little bit about I think we've heard from a couple brands this week when I've been having conversations is an NIL deal short term or is it long term? And what you see from an NFL perspective when you hear different brands talking about deals with athletes or you're talking to different athletes, which I know your program is not just not just football, it goes across gymnastics and other athletes as well supporting football. But can you talk about the length of the deals and what you see that really works and doesn't work?
Yeah, I think going back to it, we were talking about this, a lot of the deals are focused on social media and storytelling. And when we think about storytelling, following that arc is so incredibly important. There's a lot of things that happen one-off, and showing that parts of that player's personality is really crucial. But the best storytelling that I've seen from my perspective is the stuff that follows them, again, from the beginning, talks about them, and continues on. So we've seen guys at the draft, for example, we do something called draft letters, and there's parents that are talking, and a lot of the content that performs well is where brands and fans have been familiar with players from their college programs, and they know their backstory. So they understand why their grandmother is speaking on camera and talking about raising them, or they understand why something was so meaningful to that player. So watching that arc develop over years has been really rewarding and really just incredible to see how that, and then that gets used obviously to their benefit as they're working with brands long term.
I want to build on that with Brandon as you're sitting at various different tables with athletes. How often do you see the short-term deals versus the long-term? Because I think what Sana's talking about is the beauty of you could partner with Jaron now and be in with him and support him all the way into his pro career, which is a really exciting opportunity that brands didn't have before. But I think a lot of these deals are also almost one-offs at times and shorter, with a shorter lens because it's less risk for brands, right?
Yeah, I think it's so new that like it's still developing, right? But I see the shoe companies, Adidas and Nike, starting to sign guys that they think will be stars earlier and earlier because they want to start building that brand equity while they're in college, and you know the storytelling while they're in college that then can carry on into the pros. I think back to like Travis Hunter with Celsius. He represented them in college, and then you saw him with the professional ad. So I think it's so new that we'll see more and more of it, but I definitely see it trending towards like brands investing in guys early and growing with them throughout their careers.
How important is it to you, Jaron, when you look at brand partners? Do you want, I mean, obviously there's experiments to play here and try something short term with a brand, but I think just from the way you've spoken today, my guess is a longer term brand that believes in you and your future and where you're building is a priority, but I think it's important. You've got a lot of brands out here and marketers of, how do you look at that and what's important to you and how you make those decisions on an opportunity?
Yeah, definitely long-term branding is definitely what I'm looking for. That they build the story now and just continue until, God willing, the NFL. But just that's really what I look for, is if it just really fits my family, it's really going to fit me, and just allowing me to just be able to do my thing, which is continue to play football. And so just being able to represent, the brand and, the name on my back, just adding all those things together is, I think that's really what I'm looking for sure.
Absolutely. I'd love to, this one, we didn't talk about this one, but is there a favorite deal you've seen done that you didn't necessarily do that you think is kind of set the pace and set the bar for what a great NIL deal looks like? Brandon? Need a second?
Yeah, I can't think of one off the top of my head. I could just think of ones that like I enjoyed this year, and a couple that jumped to my mind. Bryce has a car deal partnership in Detroit, and he was able to, one of the security guards at his high school was without a car, or he wanted to go back and like bless him, and he did like a car giveaway to a security guard who was meaningful to him when he was in high school, and like it was just great.
Incredible.
Yeah, so like that's my favorite one from this past year.
Amazing. Sana, I know you can't totally call it out, but is there anything you've admired that was an effective storytelling?
I think that, like, as you're talking about that, right? Like, as a consumer, as somebody who's scrolling on TikTok, when I see someone do that, that makes me more invested in them. Like, oh, this seems like that's so cool. I should follow him, or like get invested in their storylines. Again, who are they off the field? I can see their highlights on NFL Network, ESPN, wherever their games are, for being broadcast, but seeing that side of them is so different, and that authentic storytelling as a consumer is something that we're continuing to chase on the league side.
Jaron, are there any other fellow athletes deals you've seen and the storytelling in social or on TV that you've admired and thought like, oh, that was really well done?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say the big one was definitely the one that you was talking about with Bryce Underwood. I seen that all over social media, so I think that was really cool. There's not much I can think off the top of my head besides that one, so I was glad he brought that one up. That was pretty cool, especially since he's from my class. Just being able to see a lot of my guys from my grade, as freshmen, just being able to play and just represent them. That was pretty cool. But I just remember seeing Bryce being able to bless the security guard from his school, so that was pretty cool.
All right. Well, while we have a lot of brand marketers in here, are there any brands you would love to work with?
I just think any brand, honestly, that is willing to work with me. I'm not picky. I'm just blessed to whatever, blessings that come my way. So I'm just, whatever comes my way, I'm just so grateful and just always thankful. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. This landscape's going to continue to evolve. I think I can speak for a lot of us here. We're now Bears fans. Go Bears. Good luck this season.